Good afternoon, everybody. This is Keri Cascio coming to you from St. Charles City County Library District in Missouri.
Muted.
I think we've got just about everyone logged in here. I hope you can all hear me. I would say if you can't, let me know, but then, I'm just hoping that you send a message to me. Today's session is how to present a webinar. We're scheduled to go for about an hour. And here is our agenda. There's a little picture of me for those of you who haven't met me before. And we're going to I'll tell you a little bit more about myself after I tell you a little bit more about the software we're using today. We're going to go to GoToWebinar, which is the system that we're using. We'll do what to cover, how to present it, keeping them interested, and then we'll do a little bit of wrap-up. Let's see, somebody seems like they are still having microphone problems. I hope that it's just one person. If anyone else is having problems, I hope that you're going to send me a message here. So I will take questions throughout. You can raise your hand if you want to try to speak through the system. You can certainly do that. Otherwise, we're just going to use the questions box. And if you have a question, you could type a question in there for me. I'll probably read it out loud for the whole group because the whole group can't see it. And then, let's see. Still trying to just help someone real quick here. Okay. So we are using some software today called GoToWebinar, also kind of part of GoToMeeting, and this is what your interface looks like. You've got a couple of different things going on here. Let me do a little drawing here. On the right side of the screen, this is your audio. It'll tell you what you're hearing. You're usually using microphone and speakers. Your speakers should turn all the way up. If you have any audio problems, that'll probably help you out. There's a small thing here that you can raise your hand if you want to actually speak with the microphone that you have, and you can also send a question in the questions log. So I'll be paying attention to questions as we go along. I'll try to usually answer them for everyone since you all can't see them, but feel free to send me questions as they come along, and it looks like all our audio problems are good, so it looks like we're ready to go. If at any time you want to shrink that little thing on the right, there is this little double arrow button, and that will close or open your screen on the side to kind of grab that control panel. So if you want to, you can always auto-hide that if that's something that you like, but for the most part, it's just going to hang out there and be on your screen. So the attendee interface is very simple. You've got a slideshow on your left, and you've kind of got your panel on the right there. Close that out. A little bit about me as we go along here. I do have a pedagogy background. I've been teaching German. I've been teaching library science, all sorts of stuff for the last 10 or 15 years. I spent some time as a sales support specialist at DRA, remember Data Research Associates, and CERSI, and I would come out and try to sell you some software. I was the person who presented the software. I usually had a separate salesperson who was really trying to sell to you. I spent 4 years as a trainer at the Missouri Library Network Corporation here in St. Louis. That is the Missouri OCLC network. And I'm now working as a branch manager at Public Library. I've been presenting with different types and pieces of software for webinars since about 2000. So I think I've probably used either as a presenter or as an attendee, I would say 5, 6, 7 different types of software. So there's a lot out there, and what we're using today is GoToWebinar. So I do have a quick poll for you, and I am curious if you've attended a webinar before. Have you, and you love them? Yes, your boss made you know you haven't had a chance to ever do it before, or know you'd rather go to the dentist because they're so darn boring. So if you want to take a moment and check that all out, and we will share the results with the group here. All right, looks like everybody has voted. Here are the results. You should be able to see them. Most of you do love webinars. Some of you haven't had a chance, and I like that one or two of you have only gone because your boss has made you, and, well, they're so boring you'd rather go to the dentist. Hopefully I'll change your mind on some of that today for the dentist person, but if not, that's fine too. Webinars are kind of here to stay. You know, it's funny that I've been using them for so long. I'm always interested to meet people who haven't had a chance to do it, and I'm always excited to at least give you a chance to try it out and see what it's really like. So we are using, as I said, the GoToWebinar software from Citrix, and this is what ALCTS has purchased to use for the division, and it's what the division is using for all the webinars that we've been doing over the last couple months. And basically, it does require a small download to your workstation. A lot of you might have figured that out as you got prepared to be on here. Sometimes that is a problem. You do need to get your IT people involved to do that download. I know I certainly do here at my library. You can connect with Voice over IP, or VoIP, if you've ever seen that before. That's what that stands for. A lot of you, looks like, are on right now with a microphone and a headset. I don't see any telephones on my little list here. Telephone calls are an option, though, and it does give the organizer still an option to mute all the mics and all the telephones. So if you ever do use the phone, make sure you use the PIN that you're given. You know, speakers are a must. That's probably about all you really need for this. Speakers and a keyboard so you can ask a question. And you also do have the option to record the webinars as needed. We are recording today's session, and we are going to send it out to everybody if you do want to listen to it again in the future. You should have also gotten a copy of the presentation that was sent out earlier today by Julie Reese. And if you didn't get that, let me know, and we can always send that out to you again after we're done here today. There are other software options out there. GoToWebinar, GoToMeeting are not the only options available to you. Some other really popular software that's out there that you may have used before. There's Live Meeting for Microsoft. There's WebEx, which is currently owned by Cisco. Centra, which I used for quite a few years, and that is by the Saba Corporation. And then there's Adobe Connect, which is put out by Adobe. I would say most of the software is very, very similar. You know, it really comes down to the features you need, the pricing, and the support. Just about all of them allow for sharing what's on your screen. That's what I'm doing right now. I'm sharing a PowerPoint. Or they allow you to upload a PowerPoint and then share other applications. They allow you to chat and talk and usually have voice over IP. And it kind of comes down to the support you need. Do you want them to host it for you? Do you want to host it at your organization and have a little bit more control over it? That's usually an option as well. How many users can you have on there at once? Sometimes they'll sell you by the number of seats that are available. Sometimes you'll be able to do it unlimited. So there really are a few options out there. And I would say it kind of comes down to the price. What can you afford? What's going to make sense for your organization? And that's really what's going to make you have that choice. So are there any questions so far about the software itself? We're going to get into a little bit more about what it's like to present with the software, and then I'll talk a bit more about putting a presentation together to use as a webinar. So again, if you have any questions as we go along, feel free to type them into that box, or if you want to play a little bit, you can always raise your hand and I'll try to give you the microphone. I have to say we haven't done that much in the ALCTS presentations we've been doing since we have such a large group of people, but I think we're kind of a smaller group today and we can always try that out if you'd like to. So again, any questions along the way, just throw them up there and I'll see them. All right. So let's talk a little bit about the presenter role. If you do ever do a webinar, you will have an option to be a presenter, and that means that you have control over your mouse and keyboard. Behind the scenes, you can chat with other panelists. So what we do here when we do the ALCTS webinars, we usually have, I don't know, 2 or 3 extra people in addition to the presenter that are kind of looking for the technicalities out there, like somebody can't hear very well, there's a problem with the microphone, the slides aren't progressing, and we kind of talk to each other in a chat format. And that's something that the attendees can't see. You can switch back and forth presenters, so if you're going to present with another person, you can go back and forth. We have done presentations like that over the last couple of months. There are drawing tools. You saw me do a little bit of that before. And there's also a neat thing in the software called the audience view. And when you click on that, you can actually see how the screen looks for everybody else. So if you're not sure if you've moved forward enough or if you're having some other problems, you can always look at that and make sure the audience has come along with you. And it's kind of nice because it's really changed over the years. I remember when I first did this back around 2000, we used to have 2 computers set up, and we'd log in as a fake person so we can see what the attendees would see, because the software was so new, we couldn't trust it and we couldn't trust the internet. It was pretty funny. Let's see. Okay, I do have a question from Jonathan. He's asking if the helpers and co-presenters are in the same room. And the answer is no. We have come together from all over the country and even Canada to do our presentations for ALCTS over the last year or so. I'm completely alone right now. I'm in my office. I'm lucky enough to have an office with a door. I know not everybody has that. If you're ever in an open cube farm, you probably need to find someplace a little more private. So that's why the chat really comes in handy, because we can do that instant messaging chat with each other even though we're not in the same room. So I'm here in St. Louis, someone might be in Maryland, someone's in upstate New York, and then our presenter is in California somewhere. And that's really kind of been the model that we've been using over time. It's been really interesting. To show you a little bit of how this looks like on my end, because I can't really show you my screen with the GoToWebinar stuff up, so I tried to take some screenshots for you. So the next slide has kind of what I see. So at the top here, it has presenters tools, and you kind of see this box. That's kind of what my screen looks like right now. It has this big box in it, and it kind of blocks part of my screen. It's really interesting. And with the drawing tool, you know, I can do whatever I want. I can put a little mustache on this girl here. I can change it into a highlighter and highlight something very sloppily. You can also do kind of a spotlight that you'll see that you can highlight different things that you're talking about. So you have a lot of little options to kind of make things a little more flashy for your attendees so that they can pay attention. You also have an option of an arrow that kind of puts these arrows next to the things that you're talking about. And then you can erase everything and go back to normal. So the tools can be fun. It depends what you want to highlight and what you're working on, if it makes sense to use it or not. What I've been doing is sharing applications. So the way that this system works, you don't have to load anything ahead of time. You just show what's on your screen. So I took my PowerPoint, I put it into slideshow format, and that's what's on my screen, and that's what you see. I do recommend that if you are presenting, that you would close any email or instant messaging applications, anything that will beep at you, because those noises, let me tell you, when you've got your headset on and you're talking and all of a sudden you hear this loud beeping noise in your head, it's a little distracting. So I do recommend closing those before you get started. If your windows are already open, you can use Alt-Tab to go between them without actually letting people see your desktop itself. So at this time I can show you I also have the ALCTS website open, and you can now see that on your screen. And it's a completely live environment. So if we want to register for the Midwinter Symposia, we can click on that and I can show you what that screen looks like. Remember, it does take a little bit longer for people to see what it looks like on the other end because you are still going over the internet and there is still a little bit of a delay. Now, there are also options when you do your sharing, and one of them is to do a clean screen to hide your menu bars. I could see right now, looking at my audience view, that you see on the bottom of my screen my start bar and little things that I have open. If I choose instead to do a clean screen, it's going to hide that taskbar and you're not going to see it anymore, and it should have just disappeared. So you do have that option as well, that people can't really see what you have open on your desktop. It's kind of nice. You can also play or pause your, see, now you can see me going through Alt-tabbing to get back to my slideshow. You can play or pause what people see. So I could have paused my screen sharing, done that Alt-tab to get back to where I wanted to be, and then restarted it, and it would have been like magic. And you would never have seen what I was kind of doing behind the scenes there. Be sure to be conscious when you're scrolling through websites, when you're pointing at things, and when you're clicking things, because there's always that little delay, and they might not be quite as far along as you are and might kind of get a little bit behind. So always remember that things don't paint on your attendee screens as quickly as they paint on your own. And that's really a good rule of thumb to keep in mind. Because I don't know how many times I've been in a presentation, whether it's online or in person, where someone will go to a website and start scrolling and you have no idea what they're trying to show you because they just kind of scroll in their own head and they know what they're looking at, but you're not really sure where they're going. Now, I showed you a little bit before of the presenter screen. I'm going to show you again here. This is really how my screen looks right now. So I've got all these little windows open. I've got my toolbar open on the right. I've got that chat window open on the bottom. I've got my questions window open on the left bottom there to see if anybody's asking me something. So I kind of rely on a printout of my slides in front of me with my notes instead of relying on what's on my screen, because I kind of make it a big mess. Not every presenter likes to do this. It's what I'm comfortable with, but just to kind of give you an idea of what the screen looks like on my end, I've basically covered up a good, I don't know, 1/4 of what I can see. So you've got all these little windows. You can undock anything you want. You have the option to, as I said, look at the audience view. I could see the attendee names. I can look at my audio. I can launch a poll. I can do all of that from this screen. I could see who's raised hands, who's asked questions. It's all on there for me. And if you do a webinar with us, we usually try to do a practice one ahead of time, like a week or so beforehand, so you're comfortable with it. So you're not just kind of, we're not throwing you in the deep end. And you kind of see what it looks like and what it'll feel like that day when people start asking you questions and start chatting at you and those sorts of things. We can also make sure that your microphone works and fun stuff like that. I will say that we have had problems with people who want to use Macintoshes to present. The software isn't quite the same. It does work. We've been told that we sound like chipmunks to the presenter, which has been kind of funny, you know, to hear that we sound like Alvin and the Chipmunks was kind of fun. And they also have a slightly different setup on their screen. So we kind of are recommending that you use a PC when possible, but I know that's not always possible for everyone. Just kind of a caveat to put out there that the Mac isn't quite there with the software yet. Okay. Now, I did tell you before, and we saw one, that you can do a poll, and all that happens there is you get a let's see, you kind of get this little window. You load them in ahead of time. You can also do it on the fly, but that kind of takes a while. And you can put in up to 8 questions for the entire presentation. Each poll can have up to 5 answers, and you could choose if the answer is going to be just choose one or choose all that apply. So they can kind of do multiple choice, or you can kind of force them to choose one or the other. So the polls kind of break things up a little bit. You put them in ahead of time, and it's a good way to kind of keep people paying attention and things like that. You can also always do what I like to call a straw poll, where you can just say, well, how many of you have done blah? Raise your hand. And then I could just kind of see from raised hands what people think without having to, ahead of the time, think of a whole poll with specific questions. I'm kind of like, have you seen this before? Have you done this before? You know, raise your hand. Are you still listening? Can you still hear me? Raise your hand, stuff like that. One of the other pieces of software I used to use, Centra, was kind of nice because you could get the attendees to do a green check, or they could do a red X, and then you can kind of get yes or no answers out of them without having to really talk to you or send you a question, and that was kind of fun. They could also laugh and clap in Centra, which I kind of miss sometimes because I always thought that was kind of cute to see happy smiling faces or clapping hands as we were going along when we would say things. The last, no, not quite the last, but we got 2 more here about the software. I talked a little bit about questions in the beginning. Some of you have sent some to me. You can enable or disable written questions. As I said, we've been using them in the ALCTS webinars as the way for people to ask any question because it's kind of hard to get people to use their microphones. Just over time, and we've got that many people, it really slows things down. When I answer a question, the way we've been doing it, I just kind of read the question aloud because nobody else can see it, and I tell you the answer. The other option, when you type a question, type an answer into a question, you can send that answer just to the person who asked the question, or you can send it to the entire group as a whole so they can all see it. And if you're in there with a bunch of other people or you're in there with another expert, you might actually refer that question or assign it to a different panelist so that they can answer it, either by typing or, again, by reading it. So that kind of tandem presenting kind of pays off. You can kind of pass those questions back and forth and get some other ideas. Also built into the system is a survey. This is kind of the screenshot you're seeing here is from the GoToWebinar administration side of things. You can ask up to 8 questions, and you can also put a link in the survey for follow-up email. What we've been doing instead is using SurveyMonkey, I think, or one of those survey systems instead, but just to let you know, it is also built in there. So I'm going to ask another poll here. Let me get that up on my screen. And let's see. So when using GoToWebinar, you must load a PowerPoint ahead of time, or you can share anything on your desktop at any time, or you can only communicate through Morse code. So while you're answering this poll, I'll also stop a little bit and ask if you've got questions about the software itself. So anything that, you know, as you've kind of seen it and we've moved along a little bit that's kind of come to your mind, let me know. You can send a question in through the question system. Okay, looks like everybody has voted. I'm going to close that poll up and share the results. Yes, you can share anything at any time. You don't have to load a PowerPoint into the system ahead of time. You certainly do have to have a PowerPoint ready, and then you just hit that slideshow and share your desktop and everyone can see it. I've worked with other systems that you have to load it ahead of time, and it changes everything. It changes it to kind of a GIF format or a JPEG format, and you lose some of the extra stuff in your slides. So it's kind of nice that you just show what you would always show in this system. Okay, looks like there are some other questions right now. Somebody asked if I'm controlling your microphone. I am, in that you are all muted right now. If someone wants to be unmuted, I could unmute you and you would be able to talk. But right now everybody is muted in the system. And I did control that because that way you don't have to, let's see, you don't have to worry about background sounds in people's offices, coughing, breathing, and those sorts of things. We just kind of default that. Let's see. Somebody else asked that you can only see what's on the desktop but not the control panel, and that's correct. You can only see the programs on my desktop, but you cannot see any of the control panels that I'm currently using. So I can't show you what my screen looks like, and that's why I had this, this screen here, because I can never show you what my panels look like, so that's why I have to kind of take a screenshot. So you'll see everything that's behind my panels. It's kind of interesting. It's a little bit different than some of the other systems I've used. Are there any additional questions? If so, just type them in. See if I can answer them, see if any of those brought up different questions. Okay. So things to remember about the software itself. You can create those polls ahead of time and load them into the system. Let me get back onto my screen here. Actually, I just realized that you're still seeing the GoToWebinar poll. I need to hide those results. And this is, whoops. And that's the screen I was talking about for 5 minutes without you actually seeing it. See, isn't it fun? Someone said that they lost audio bit and missed the questions. One of the questions was, you don't see my control panels, you only see what's on my desktop. So it's kind of hidden behind my control panels. And also I do have everybody muted, so you can't actually talk in your microphones. And we just do that so that we don't get a lot of that background noise, breathing, typing, office kind of sounds. So, okay. Any other questions? Let's see. Nope, that looks like everything. So remember those polls ahead of time, that you're sharing your desktop. You can use a highlighter tool. You can use drawing tools. You can move between things on your desktop. You can have a PowerPoint up, and you can show a website. You can show a piece of software if you're trying to train someone on using software, or you could just do a PowerPoint presentation. If you do show live things like a website or software, just kind of keep track that people's screens don't paint as quickly as yours, and try not to make them too dizzy with all the scrolling. So those are my tips for that. If you think of anything else about the software as we go along, let me know. Otherwise, we're going to go into a different part of the presentation here, and we're going to talk about the content of a webinar as opposed to the software you use to do a webinar. You know, the first thing you kind of ask yourself is, what should your webinar cover? You know, why are you even doing this? And some of the stuff from the next couple of slides were taken by a book called Teach Beyond Your Reach by Robin Neidorff. And I do have the bibliography of that near the end of the presentation. And Robin Neidorff always says that your learning objectives are really your raw material. You kind of need a way to plan and develop your content in a way that is more learner-friendly. So it kind of helps if those objectives are action-oriented, if they're measurable, and they're really focused on that learner. Because you're going to always think about what is in it for the student. What are they going to take away from the class? What's their pain? What are you trying to solve? So if you were to tell me, well, these people have to do a webinar next week in GoToWebinar, kind of showed you the software, and now I'm going to kind of show you how to pick the content. And talking about content, there was one more question about embedding video in PowerPoint. And that's actually a really great question, George. I'm glad that you brought that up, because sometimes I forget this. Okay, so you could show what's on your screen. So if I embedded video in my PowerPoint and I showed that PowerPoint, you'd be able to see the video, but the attendees would not be able to hear it. If you want to have sound or audio coming from your computer, there must be a way for your microphone to pick that up. So if you're just using a headset, it's probably not going to pick it up very well. You would kind of have to rig a separate microphone outside to be able to pick up that sound. And I've tried to do that before in online presentations with mixed success, but it's really something you'd have to think about if that's going to be effective in what you're trying to do. So you might be able to show the video, but getting the sound across to the attendees is a little bit of a different story because it's not going to just directly pipe out because it doesn't have that microphone ability. So just keep that in mind. So you'd have to think, is it really worth it that I show this video? Is that really going to help my student get what they need? Or can I point them to look at that video afterwards? Is that something that I can kind of say, you know, there's a great video, go take a look at it? Somebody said that they did it on Adobe Connect, and they showed a video where the audio seemed to work fine. Well, that's really interesting. I'm not sure how that's set up because I just haven't, they must have been thinking about how that was going to work on theirs because it's not kind of an automatic thing. So just kind of keep that in mind. Definitely test it beforehand before you do it. When you look at the scope of your content for a webinar, again, think about what they really need, what's going to be meaningful to them. Is your in-depth knowledge something that's going to help get them started down a path to learn more? Or is it going to be too in-depth and kind of throw them off what you're really trying to deliver to them? Because sometimes we get into that trap where we're an expert on our topic, we're an expert on Ferber, we're an expert on institutional repositories, but are we able to express a piece of that to the attendees that's going to help them with their job right away? Are they going to be able to get off of that webinar and go and do something that's going to affect their daily work? We try to pick things that are more timely when we do this. When I say we, I'm on the Continuing Education Committee for ALCTS. And we're always looking for new topics and things that are really relevant now and kind of get people at that point of need. You know, you're competing for demands on people's time right now. As we do more webinars, as ALCTS does them, as other organizations do them, there's a lot more opportunity for professional development, and they have a lot of choices. And what are they going to pay for? What are they not going to pay for? What are they going to come to you for? So you really need to know what you're doing, the time of the attendee, and when to leave things out, when to leave things in. So is the video going to help? Maybe it will, maybe it won't. Interesting that it works in Adobe Connect. I haven't really tried it yet, to be honest, in this system. When I did it with a different piece of software, I wasn't able to do it. Something else when you're doing your content, you know, think of creating 15-minute increments. Think of how to break up your presentation so that people can pay more attention. They're not seeing you. You know, here you are as an attendee on the other side of the screen. I'm talking at you. You saw a picture of me in the beginning. You're probably, you know, looking at your email and playing solitaire and using Facebook in the background because I know that's what I'd be doing. I don't know if there's a webinar yet that I've been an attendee to that I don't have something else on in the background that also is competing for my attention. So think about that kind of short attention span and think about breaking up your topics a little bit more as you go along. I threw in a couple of sample topics for you to show you, you know, we've been doing webinars about an hour. Some other groups will do them for an hour and a half. Kind of depends on who your audience is and what you're trying to get across. So think about more narrow topics that are going to get people's interest and, again, things that they would be able to log off of that webinar and actually do something with it that day or the next day in their jobs. So what I tried to do here was show you broader topics to more narrow topics. So somebody says, wow, we should really learn more about disaster planning. Well, disaster planning is a huge topic. But then if you say, well, let's spend an hour talking about using the D-Plan system from the NEDCC, that might be more manageable and more practical. Metadata standards, really broad. Implementing EAD, less broad, might still be a little broad, but at least it's more specific. Acquisition workflows, what about acquisitions? What are you trying to figure out right now, or what did you just accomplish at your library that would help someone else, such as implementing approval plans for getting new ebooks. And then electronic resources, I have the example of negotiating license agreements, which is probably something you'll see coming out of ALCTS, hopefully, in the short term. I'm not really sure where we are on that. You know, and look at our institutional repository series that ALCTS has done as an example for smaller topics. Once a month, we've had an institutional, I can never say it right, institutional repository webinar. There's one next week on copyright. Recently did one looking just at open access, right before Open Access Week. That was kind of nice. You know, there are different ways to really hone in on something and give them what they need to move forward. So when you're thinking about that timing, and this is probably advice for any presentation that you're going to do, you're going to try to create a session, a webinar that lasts 60 to 90 minutes. Longer than that, you're really pushing it for people's attention. Try to break it into 15-minute segments as much as you can, even if that just means that every 15 minutes you kind of take a pause, reiterate what you just said, ask for questions, give people that time to kind of reconnect with you and remember that they're actually on a webinar. And another way to do that is to have some sort of little activity or a poll at the end of those 15 minutes. Maybe if you're talking about open access and somebody, let's see, when we did that, they did a poll, are you ready for Open Access Week? Well, it could have been write something down that you're doing for Open Access Week, type it into the questions box, and I'll share it with the whole group. So give people like 2 or 3 minutes to do a little task to kind of bring them back into what you're saying. And try to use an agenda to stay on track. I'm a big fan of an agenda in the beginning to kind of give people what they're in for. What are they going to be doing for the next 60 minutes? And, you know, really focus on that learner, because sometimes as a presenter, you're thinking, wow, how am I ever going to get everything across in an hour? That's just not long enough. When really on the other side, your attendees are thinking, wow, that's a lot of information. I'm not really sure what I can do with this. I'm kind of spaced out, and I have 20 emails to answer now that I've been on this webinar for an hour. So make it relevant, make it short, make it to the point and something that they can walk away and use. Also, if you're thinking about presenting with other people, really think about how that might split up. Maybe you decide you need a 90-minute webinar for 3 people, but don't think that each person then gets 30 minutes. You need time for questions, you need time for introductions, you need time for wrap-up, and really kind of cut down on that time. And you might even need a moderator to kind of keep you all on track. It just kind of depends on your style. So you've decided what you're going to talk about. You've thought about it. You kind of made a little outline agenda for yourself, how you're going to break it up into smaller topics. Then, well, you got to make a slideshow. And depending on who you are, you might do that first. You might do that after. You might do it as you're going along. But when you are doing slides, remember, in here I'm going to do exactly what I'm saying not to do. Speak to those slides and don't just read them out loud. People can read. People are looking at the screen. They can see what's there. You don't have to read that word by word by word for somebody, because we're all adults and we can all read. Timing-wise, plan on spending about 2 or 3 minutes per slide. That's the general rule of thumb to use for how long a presentation will take. And in the end, this presentation is 23 slides, which is kind of pushing it for an hour, I would say. But some of them are just screenshots and things like that, so they went a little bit faster. But you know, keep that in mind. If you're going to do, if you have an hour, and you want to present for about 45 minutes, and you want to leave time for talking, do that 45 divided by 3, and you're talking about 15 or 16 slides. Add images to your slides. You can add transitions to them. Again, all of that will show, at least with GoToWebinar, you'll see that. With some of the other ones, and you have to upload it ahead of time, you lose those transitions or the little happy dancing GIFs. You know, if you have like a dog running across the bottom of your screen and a nice little movable GIF, that's going to go away with some software depending on what it is. So there are some best practices out there. I gave you 2 links. We can take a look at them quickly here. One of them is from Gar Reynolds, and let me see which one that is here. He has a nice little website with the top 10 slide tips. His #1 tip, and I would say that's a pretty darn good one, is to keep it simple. You really want to get across things in a way that your audience can see. And watch now, just scroll down a little bit. Limit the number of bullet points and text that you have. And there are some examples on here that you can see. And people always say, oh, I missed your presentation. Can you just send me your slides? Well, if they're really good, you probably would have to give them your notes to it as well for them to get everything that you were trying to cover. I'm going to scroll down a little bit more here. And he kind of gives you 4 different options for things. You know, what's really going to catch people's eye? A big number 72 is really interesting because then you have to explain to people what they're seeing. You kind of grab them visually and then bring them in with what you're talking to them about. So that's kind of a neat concept. So as it goes along, it talks about graphics and some other things. So if you have some time, you know, take a look at this. It's a really nice site, real quick tips. And Virtual Salt also has a nice PowerPoint tip page, very simple page, a lot of white space, and I like it because as a creator and recipient of many PowerPoint presentations, we have all sometimes felt like we're in for death by PowerPoint. So please be nice to your attendees and try not to give too much overkill. And he has some stuff on this site which is nice because it's always, how much should I put on my slide? There are different rules out there. None of them are hard and fast. But at least these can give you some guidelines if you're really not sure. And again, if you have too many words to present, it might be time to add a handout to what you're doing. I think that usually works pretty well. So let me go back to my slideshow here. And I've got another quick poll for you. See if you're paying attention there. When presenting a PowerPoint presentation, you should read every slide, verbatim for emphasis, use as many flashing GIFs as possible, or speak to the slide, not from the slide. And again, take some time to look at those pages because they're really nice. Looks like most of you have voted. I'm going to close the poll out and share those results with you. And most of you are paying attention because really you should be speaking to the slide, not from the slide. I went to a presentation yesterday at my Chamber of Commerce meeting, and the guy even admitted that he was using 8-point type to get all the text that he wanted up there on his presentation. But at least he wasn't reading it aloud to us. That would have really been torture. He just kind of said, well, here's all the information, but let me just tell you what I really need to say to you. And that was kind of nice. He was talking about vitamin C. We were talking about the swine flu at the chamber meeting. It was kind of interesting. All right. So we're coming up near the end here. When you are presenting, when you have decided, yes, I'm going to present a webinar, I could totally do this. There are a couple of things to keep in mind. One thing is to find a comfortable private location. As I said before, I am in my office with the door closed. I guess you could see me if you're hanging out the window in the parking lot, but no one's really out there, so they don't see me in here. You know, I could be in here, my shoes off, and you know, walking around and modulating my voice, all of those things, and I don't feel that much of an idiot because no one can see me. And it really changes how your voice projects. So I have stood up I am moving my arms around and really putting that emphasis into my voice, and it makes a big difference than when you're just sitting at your desk and kind of doing a monotone, and then you start to kind of drift in and out and you're just reading the slides. So practice by yourself. I mean, basically, I think you have to stand around and talk at yourself for a while until you're comfortable with it, because you're missing all of that body language from your attendees. Everybody who's in here on this webinar, I can't see you. I don't know what you're doing. Like I said, you could be listening to me, you could be checking your email, you could be playing solitaire, I don't know. Maybe a little Bejeweled Blitz out there on Facebook, you know, any number of things. So I can still get my expression across to you by moving around just as I would if I were presenting in person, and that's really going to kind of come through in my voice. And I always think it's funny to have that smile on there. Did any of you ever work someplace where they put the smile stickers on your phones? I know I've worked retail and had that smile sticker, and sometimes they say, "Smile, the boss might be calling." Those are definitely my favorites. And it sounds silly, but it really works. The more you smile, the more people can tell. And also, you know, use your mute button. Sometimes you have to cough. Sometimes you have to drink some water. And I do recommend having a glass of water with you if you're ever going to do this, because you're going to talk for an hour straight, and you're going to need some water. But it's really kind of not seeing people on the other side of the screen that kind of catches you, and that's what most people are uncomfortable with webinars. Like I said, for ALCTS, we have been getting on there ahead of time, doing some practice sessions, getting you comfortable with it. We're not just going to throw you out to the wolves by yourself. And, you know, we're always here to support you, and we try to make sure that you have some level of comfort before you start doing a presentation all on your own. You know, I've done some presentations in the past. I've led webinars where I haven't gotten a single question. Been on there for an hour, hour and a half. Nobody says a word to me. And then afterwards, the evaluations were like, "Oh, that was great. It was really interesting." So you just never really know what's going on, and you kind of just have to get past that when you're doing the online presentations. So the best you can do is try to keep them interested. And one way to do this, I learned this term at a workshop a long time ago about doing workshops. It's called sell the sizzle. Why are they there? What is the thing that that's going to make them pay attention? You know, webinars are really effective and useful, and anyone can do it. As long as you've got a good timing and topic choice, that's something that people really need, that point of need, it's going to make them happy. It's going to really give them something. People always kind of remember how they feel about presentations. They don't always remember what you say. So if you're not standing in front of them, they're going to kind of get your voice is what's going to make them say, "Oh, I really like that," or "Oh, that wasn't so great." Personal anecdotes. Share your real-world experience. If you're doing a presentation, you have experience in this topic. You might not be an expert, but you certainly had to deal with it and have thought about it and have all these things to add. And it's really that real-world stuff that adds to the experience of your attendees. And then try to break it up. Again, activities, polls, different kind of questions. Just always remember you have to give people a little bit of time to respond as well. If you stop for a moment and say, "Hey, I'm ready to take questions now," don't expect every hand to go right up and questions to come flying across the screen. People have to kind of take their time. Sometimes they're in a room with 15 other people listening to you. For the most part, people who have been coming to the ALCTS webinars are not on there by themselves. They're there in larger groups, and they're all listening in. One person might have control of the keyboard, and then they have to kind of talk to them and have them type it out. So it might feel like deathly silence. It might feel like radio silence, you know, that kind of thing. That's okay. You can have that. You know, just feel comfortable, and you'll get by just fine. So I have my last poll for you, as you might think of any additional questions that you have. And I'm asking webinar attendees, how much can they pay attention to any given topic. They listen for about 5 minutes. You can listen to for about 15 minutes without a little break, 30 minutes or 60. What's kind of the upper limit of people's tolerance of listening to any thought or idea? Got those coming in here. It's kind of, I can also see the percentage of people who have voted. So right now I can see that 92% have voted. And I'm going to take that as most of you, and I'm going to close that poll out, and I'm going to share the results with you. Most of you said 15 minutes. That's kind of what I think. 15 minutes. Half hour, yeah, 60 minutes is probably the most that you can pay attention to an entire webinar. So that's also pretty valid. But I know that there are lots of you out there where 5 minutes is probably about all you can take. And that's why you've got other stuff going on in the background. And that's just kind of the facts of life for webinars. Let's see, and I do have some questions here. I'm going to go back to the presentation real quick. Here's some further reading for you. Again, Teach Beyond Your Reach by Robin Nydorf. It's a real interesting book. It covers all sorts of electronic classrooms, but there's sections for synchronous and online classes, and if you're doing webinars or even web courses, it's a neat book to look at if you never have before. And there's also a user guide to GoToWebinar out there. Somebody said, are there other examples of activities besides polls and questions? You know, it depends if you want them, how much you want them to bring back to you, I think. You only have so much time. I've done it before where my polls are actual harder quizzes, rather they were quizzes. I used to teach a class called Cataloging 101 online. It was a 2-day class. Each day we did 90 minutes, and it was the basics of cataloging. So I would put up things like, which one of these is a correct 245 field for this book? And it kind of gave them a chance to do a mini quiz, take a few minutes, think about what we learned, think about what we talked about, and apply it. So using a poll as a quiz is also an interesting way to do things if it's more of a class environment. But it's hard to do the back and forth. I have to say that it's hard to kind of get a group together, or at least in the software we have here, because it's webinar, I'm not sure if we really have, some software will have chat rooms where they can kind of go off for for 5 minutes or 10 minutes and chat with each other and bring something back to the group. That's always an option too. Again, it depends on how long you have to talk. The way that we've been doing the webinars, they're a lot like conference presentations. They're a lot like, I have a topic, I've got 45 minutes, I want to tell you about it, and like to think about it and bring it back to the other staff at your library. If you start getting into the 90-minute thing and you're doing more of a classroom, you might have different options for keeping people interested in doing activities. Are there other questions? Let's see. Somebody asked if there's an upper limit on the number of attendees. Is there a limit to the program itself, or is it a matter of practicality for handling questions and polls? The system that, in the package that ALCTS currently has with GoToWebinar, allows for 1,000 attendees. So 1,000 different people can log in at once. I think there is always, though, a matter of practicality for handling questions and polls. I would say a lot of our webinars have been getting into the 20s and 30s, and they've been just fine for the questions and polls. That hasn't really been a big deal. When you start getting more than 30 or 40, it's a little bit hard to handle, and you probably really don't want to take any verbal questions, because that's what really might slow you down, making sure their technology works, making sure they can talk, kind of gets sticky. So. Okay. A little bit of wrap up here. Remember, focus on your topic. What is it that people really need to learn. Get comfortable with the software first, of course, as well. Create an outline to work from. Don't just kind of go in there and give them everything you know about a topic. Really kind of make it more specific. Practice. Again, practice talking to yourself. Practice looking at your computer screen and talking. There are people on the other end, and they really are listening to you, even if they're doing other things. A lot of us are multitasking, but at least you don't really know what other people are doing while you're talking. Check in every now and then, see how they're doing. Do you have questions? Do you have problems? Do you have ideas? Do you want to share something? Look for that kind of back and forth a little bit from your attendees so they don't think you're just talking at them for 45 minutes. Try to get something in there as an activity, a little something else to keep them paying attention, and sell the sizzle. Why are they there that day? What do they need to get out of this? As subject experts, sometimes we say a little bit too much, and it's always good to think about what you can leave out. One of the hardest things, I think, in teaching is knowing or even considering what to leave out. Really, really hard. So we're about at the end of our time here. I will take any other questions if there are any. I know some of you have to leave for time reasons. I know a couple people have jumped off already. That's fine. If you've got some more questions, I'm here. Otherwise, I really thank you for your time this afternoon. It was nice to have all of you on here, and I hope I've given you a little bit of confidence and a couple of ideas of how you might go forward, do some webinars on your own, and really bring something back to the community and bring something back to ALA, no matter what division you might be part of. I think there's really a lot of opportunities to do continuing education that doesn't require attendance at a conference, and that's what we're really working towards. I'm really excited that we've been moving forward on this. So if you've got any extra questions, throw them out there. Let's see. Can this software let us click on a link? Yes. I can give you control over the mouse and keyboard if I wanted to. Until then, you can't just click on a link because you're just kind of looking at the screen. So I can share with you that you can click on it, but just as a regular attendee, no, you can't. All right, anything else? Software, any other stuff? If you do think of any questions, feel free to email me, call me. Like I said, I've been doing this a long time. I've come up across a lot of different situations, technology, problems over the years. So I'm always happy to talk about it. And I thank you all for joining me today. And I hope you have a great afternoon. Thanks.